America and so on, and go back spoiled and do more harm when they go back. Alhamdulillah, some of your brothers and sisters at that time realized that things were really tragic. And some of it was reaction. Some of it was really to see that can we do something more than normal for the Islamic work and the Muslims, especially when they were in the West. So Alhamdulillah, Muslim student associations, whatever name you call them, in England, Muslim Student Society, and in America, Muslim Student Association, and so on. These incubators were formed in various universities. And Alhamdulillah, in about 10, 15 years, even many of those who did not practice Islam in their country, they came to there, and when they found the environment and they saw their responsibility to be able to represent Islam, they themselves in America or in Britain or in Europe, they started to acquire the knowledge of Islam with them. And we were from that group. Alhamdulillah, this brought the intellectuals of the Muslims from all over the world, outside the Muslim world, to be able to know each other, to work together with each other, and also feel blessed by Allah Ta'ala that they were born Muslims. And also those others who saw this kind of a caliber people, they were hundreds and thousands were coming to Islam. Just to give you a figure to make you a bit happy, that between 63, when we formed the first national organization in America, Muslim Student Association of US and Canada, until 71, when I left America at that time, we made the best estimates, about 1.5 million people entered the fold of Islam. We didn't have du'at, we didn't have people even knowing the Quran by heart and so on. These intellectuals of the Ummah, they were able to work in such a way that they made an impact. And of course, the civil rights movement in America helped a lot, especially for black brothers and sisters and so on, when they found what is Christianity and what is Islam. There was not so really, they were thrilled to see what they had in their mind. Islam stood for all of it. And people like Malcolm X did a wonderful job in this work. People like Muhammad Ali Clay, they did a wonderful job in these things. So the Ummah started to get together, think collectively, and that was very important. Work collectively. When they go back, this interaction to their countries, they were knowing each other and so on. It made a big difference. In England, in 1960, we formed the first Muslim Student Association or Society in country level, after having in the universities. In Europe in 1961. In America, then forces in Britain for Arabic and English-speaking people. In America, 63. When we found that, alhamdulillah, one thing I said also to encourage our brothers and sisters who are here, inshallah, leaders of the intellectuals in this Caribbean area, these people who were coming to Islam, they were more committed in many times than those who were born Muslims. And they really played an extremely important role in the country, in all these countries, and it made the feeling that the real internationality of the Islam. Okay. When success was in America, and this one point also is that many times people say for you to be able to succeed, you have to have money. Yes, you have to have the money, but if you have the right people and the people who are serious in work, alhamdulillah, working collectively, and I'll tell you this with all this experience, that never money was the problem or an obstacle for the Islamic work. It was having the right people, quality people, willing to work with each other collectively. And we saw the results. Then we went to a step further, International Islamic Federation of Student, IFSO, International Islamic Federation of Student Organizations, in 1969. I was the first Secretary General of that organization. First time Muslims ever had an international organization and in the name of Islam. 73 came World Assembly of Muslim Youth. It expanded to at least 120 countries. These things were developing very much, and we were going from success to success in all these different parts of the world. I remember when I made a round the world trip to encourage formation of Muslim student associations in different countries. We made about 18. In 18 countries, one formed. We started 70, 71, they were full functioning. In India alone, when SIM was formed, in 2 years, we had 2,000 branches of the organization. Of course, India is a continent, and it's a big country, and so on. So, Islam, when it is presented in the way which the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam exemplified the Quran in himself as a human being walking on earth with the representation of the Quran, it made a real difference. And we had no problem among ourselves. This is one denomination, the other one, or the black or white or green and whatever you have. It was a brotherhood of its real form, which Allah Ta'ala wanted for humanity. Okay, I don't want to make it too long and take all your time on this, but I'm coming to the next step. After we did all kinds of Islamic work everywhere, we found that Muslims have all the resources. They have the land, they have the money, they have the mineral resources, everything. The number, we have a very big number. The countries, we have a very big number of countries. But still, we were behind the nations of the world. In 1977, we decided to have a conference in Switzerland, in Lugano, a small town, very beautiful there, and we brought about 32 most outstanding Muslim scholars and workers in da'wah in the world. For a week they sat down. We wanted to see what is wrong and how we can remedy this situation. And all who is who now in the Muslim world, if I mention the names, they were present in that place. And with the help of Allah, unanimously they came out with one conclusion, and that is, unfortunately, it is the way we have been brought up and the way we are thinking. We have to change it. We have to be able to use it in the proper manner which Allah Ta'ala has given us these brains. And they said we have to have an international organization, and we called it International Institute of Islamic Thought. Alhamdulillah, in 1981, it was finalized and realized, and about 5, 6 of your brothers, they dedicated themselves to this work, so that we can go from one level to another. And this is the essence of what we are talking about of IIIT. And we want all of them to benefit from this great experience which we got with the Muslim scholars all over the world. We have had many international conferences, we had many seminars, many lectures, all kinds of forms for this. And in IIIT recently, alhamdulillah, we have been able also to try to open avenues for every Muslim who want to do research, especially in the social sciences, humanities, and Islamic studies. We try to get for them resources to be able to fulfill their desire in the research. We have tried also to see in the Muslim universities all over the world how we can upgrade their level. One of the items which we took, let us look at their staff. You go to a university, maybe 1 or 2 at the most, you have a PhD. Therefore, we said anyone who has a bachelor's and teaching in any Muslim university, we must get them scholarship to be able, especially in social sciences, humanities, and Islamic studies, we have to get them to get their masters. Those who have masters, they get them their PhDs. Those who have got their PhDs, give them an opportunity to take a year sabbatical and go and do it in another country and so on. Alhamdulillah, this is gathering momentum. But the most critical thing was, we said that West have done wonderful job in the social sciences and humanities, and they have done it without having the wahi item in it. Forgetting about the wahi, and therefore they did not have the guidance. And many times they were going in a different direction. We said we have to be able to bring down the concepts and the guidance of the Quran and the Sunnah when we are studying in our specializations, to see where that fits in with these things. And we called it Islamization of knowledge or integration of knowledge. So, alhamdulillah, now you will be happy to know that we have about 25, 30 offices in different parts of the world, or some of them full branches, and in every area. Caribbean was we were a bit late in it. And alhamdulillah, we said, since we are going to have this wonderful conference, all the communities knowing each other, let us also bring the IIIT dimension. Alhamdulillah, we have outstanding people in this area, and inshallah their contribution will be even greater than the others. Brother Dr. Ahmed Alwani, his father was one of the founders with us also for IIIT, one of the greatest scholars of our time, maybe match of Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi and of this level, Abu Hassan Nadawi and so on, Mawdudi. These people made great impact on the Ummah. We were the engineers. We were the doers for them, serving them to see that the work is succeeded. Usually you find the people in social science, they are too busy thinking they don't care about the organizational logistics of the things. So we do a better job than them in that one. So we had really a team. And this teamwork made really its impact. Alhamdulillah, anywhere you go in the Muslim world, you will find that we have made some, at least, imprints. Now it is your turn to deepen these imprints, inshallah, and try whatever you can. Give this message to our generation. Let us have much more. Instead of all of our boys and girls going for medicine and engineering, and it was in our country the same thing. Alhamdulillah, we were able to attract some of the best brains also to come to social sciences, because they are ruling us everywhere. And let us have at least the more knowledgeable people to be able to do it rather than only army people and so on. So I'll stop here and say, welcome, brothers and sisters, for making the effort to be with us here. Share with us this great responsibility in front of Allah Ta'ala. I really, after all these years of work and traveling all over the world, I see the light of Islam is coming in the end of the tunnel. Despite whatever we are saying, especially in the last few years, the mess which has happened in our Muslim countries. This century, inshallah, will be the century of Islam. And there are all the indications for it. Let us all put our efforts and say we came at a time, inshallah, this revival of Islam will be there and we will be able to serve our new generations with a higher level of education and in a better form and inshallah more effective way with the background of the wahi which has come and made us kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته.
Thank you, Dr. Tutunji. So inshallah, our next, if I can ask Dr. Nasser Mustafa and Dr. Ahmad Alwani to make the way, inshallah, to the stage. We are fortunate to have firstly, Dr. Nasser Mustafa to be able to introduce Dr. Ahmad Alwani. Dr. Nasser Mustafa is one of our local lecturers at the University of the West Indies in the Faculty of Sociology. And he is very well known to the TML area and to the Muslims in this country. So I'm not going to spend more time introducing him. Rather leave him to be able to introduce Dr. Alwani, inshallah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Riza. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. I will join with Brother Dr. Riza in welcoming everyone, especially those of you who are joining us today for the first time. We had a very productive weekend and we engaged in many important sessions discussing some of the issues facing Muslims in the Caribbean. It is my pleasure this morning to introduce our next speaker. As Dr. Tutunji mentioned, he is the son of a renowned Islamic scholar, Taha Jaber Alwani, who we have read many of his books. So it is a great privilege to have Dr. Ahmad Alwani, who is the Vice President of the IIIT, the International Institute of Islamic Thought. He's the Director of Curriculum Development. He is also the Executive Director of the Heritage Education Trust. He holds a PhD in Adult Learning and Human Development from Virginia Tech. His research interests are in transpersonal human development and reform of education. He is also the Vice President of the Marif for Education and Training in Saudi Arabia. He is the Dean of Continuing Education at Virginia Tech University, the Executive Dean of the Graduate School of Islamic and Social Sciences, where he developed a graduate program in Islamic Studies. So it is with great pleasure that I invite Dr. Ahmad Alwani to address us. Dr. Alwani.
Thank you very much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear brothers, I am very thrilled to be here. This is my first visit to Trinidad and to the region, to the Caribbean region. But from all I've heard in the last couple of days, it's really thrilling to see what Muslims are doing. And for us, at least, I live in the U.S., in such a remote places, in small islands where 3,000 population ranges to 12 million. So mashallah, the work that you have been doing, we are grateful for all what you are doing on the ground. So from that perspective, hearing all what you have been saying about the communities in the Caribbean, from small islands to larger islands, one of the issues that we as a community always deal with is education. So some of you pointed out to the issues of education communities, in your own communities, whether it's Islamic schools or Islamic educations or complementary Islamic education, that's lacking in your communities. And of course, as a Muslim community in the diaspora, we all, including of course us in the US as a Muslim community in the US, deal with these issues on a continuous basis. We raise our kids in communities that are largely non-Muslims, and we have to deal with the challenges of these communities, the values, the predominant values of these communities that might be different than ours. And we have the urge and the need to protect our new generation of youth and kids, to be able to raise them Islamically, and in the meantime, not in isolation, of course, of the larger society. So these challenges, have been met in different ways, of course, in different communities. And realizing, as Dr. Tunji has started by saying that, introducing IIIT and its focus on education, after going through all this great da'wah work since the 60s and the 70s, and coming to the realization back in 1977 with all the great minds that came together to discuss the problems of the Ummah, that actually the intellectual crisis is the crisis that we as Muslims need to deal with. And addressing the intellectual crisis at different levels, of course, from K-12 education to higher education, to youth development programs, formal and informal education in general, where we can deal with this issue, with this problem, and prepare our next generation of Muslims to carry on their responsibilities. I represent an organization, IIIT, the International Institute of Islamic Thought, in this conference. And I have after the speech I've heard from Dr. Tunji, the burden on my shoulder of carrying some of the responsibilities, at least, that this great generation has actually started, and left for us to carry on the torch and continue the great work that they have started back then. So with this, I would like to carry on not so much the organizational aspects of IIIT, because Dr. Tunji, I think, touched upon this. He's one of the founders. He knows the history much better than I do. So I think we covered that part. What I would like to speak about, more or less, is the intellectual development and the transformation of IIIT's work since the 80s, when it started to deal with the intellectual crisis of the Ummah. So back in the 70s, they did define the intellectual crisis of the Ummah as the core issue that the Institute dedicated itself to deal with. But how to deal with it was a different aspect altogether. So initially, the Institute of Islamic Thought, IIIT, adopted the concept of Islamization of knowledge. To basically, the assumption is that knowledge is somehow carry with it a worldview, and that worldview could be biased towards one set of values versus the other. So the idea of Islamization of knowledge is the assumption that the social sciences, as they stand, they are biased toward a Western set of values and a Western culture. And Muslims have been deprived of these social sciences, for example, being in service of their own societies. So if you take, for example, anthropology and what it is based on, in a sense, it was a Western science, social science, to be able to facilitate the colonization of the Muslim world. So this is something, of course, it's transformed itself into something different at this moment. But initially, and how it started in this realm. So the institute focused on trying to deal with the social sciences, the Western social sciences, Islamically, and introduce to them some elements of an Islamic worldview. So to go back a little bit about just to kind of deal with the problem itself and how education actually can and will affect the who we are as people, whether we are Muslims or non-Muslims, and how this actually affect the way we think and the way we deal with issues and the way we deal with problems. So there's a story back in, and it's a real story, back in 1744, when there was a treaty between the native Indians and the Americans at that time. It's called Lancaster Agreement or Treaty. And part of that was for the Americans to educate and offer scholarships, if you would, in modern term, to native Indians. So they went to the Indians, to the six tribes at that time that were represented, and they told them that, we want to offer you scholarships, free education for one of each tribe of your youth, of your students, to study at William College. And this is the top education that was offered to the white man, to the Americans, basically at that time. So this was a privilege, of course, and it was given to the Indians as something, that they should jump on and cherish. But to the surprise of the Americans, authorities at that time, the Indians apologized politely, and they told them that, look, you take our youth and you educate them in your own institutions, and the problem is they come back to us and we don't know what to do with them. They cannot do the actual field work that's required from us, in our habitat where we live. And they're too isolated from our community because they don't understand our issues anymore once they go out and stay for a few years and get educated. So they come back isolated from our community. They cannot deal with our issues and our problems, and they don't know what to do. They forget their skills, basically, the actual skills that they would be doing, in terms of agriculture and work in the field and that sort of things. So we don't want that. They're just kind of, we don't want to create or to send our youth to you to educate them, and they come back and we cannot have a use of them. But thank you very much, and this is it's a great offer. This is a real story. This is not a made-up story. But the thing is, if you go back, trace what happened to the Indians after that, the native Indians, yes, they wanted to protect their culture, and they wanted to protect what they stand for, and rightly so. And every community, including the Muslim community, need to do this. But in the meantime, if you go back to what happened to the Native Indians, when they did not get modern education, and they did not expose themselves to modern science and modern education and what America had to offer at that time in terms of education, what made it what it is right now, you know, in its 200-year or so history. They were left behind. So every community, you're dealing with two issues here. There is certain degree of preservation of our own culture, our own values, our own religions, our own norms, and everything that we stand for. But in the meantime, we cannot be isolated from everything else, from science, from math, from you know, exploring space and stuff. Otherwise, we will stay, as happened later on with the Native Indians, unfortunately, we'll stay in our own cocoons, comfortable with it, talking to each other, but not related to what's going on in the world. So what options do we have? So one option is what the Native Indians has chosen, which is basically to stay within what you're doing well and preserve your identity and your culture and your religion the way they were. And at the end, look what happened. They're almost irrelevant, except if they start going back to society, to Western societies, and intermingle with them and be one of them, basically. But as a community, it did not survive, really. It's not a success story, to put it this way. And the other option is for us to be one of the crowd and accept everything the modern science and Western civilization throws at us without any scrutiny, or a way of trying to at least distill or at least digest it in our own culture and our own religion and our own norms and values. And this is where the issue of the, if you would, the issue of intellectual crisis for Muslims and educational crisis for Muslims is coming from. We have a certain belief system. We have a certain set of values that might be different in many ways than what's actually existing out there. So social sciences, although Muslims have contributed greatly to them initially, when we were playing a role of leadership in science and technology and in social sciences and philosophy and medicine and every field. So we contributed, we were part of it. We can't say it's Western civilization, purely Western civilization. Muslims were in Spain, Muslims were in Europe, and they contributed to this civilization. So it's a human civilization. It's not so much just Western civilization. But now, with the, unfortunately, the Muslim situation the way it is, we are no longer the leaders of, and the major contributors to civilization. We are followers to a large extent, except in few cases. So when this happened, we were left behind. And we have to, as Muslims, as a community, and as intellectuals, as even people of faith, we need to deal with this issue. We need to deal with this issue in a way that is going to fulfill our needs, specific needs. So, if you look at, and without going through too much details, but if you look at the Western social sciences and the concept of social sciences in general, you find out that, they fragmented knowledge. So in other words, as if human being is divided into sections. So there is a psychiatrist that deals with the psychological issues of a person. There's, the medical doctor who deals with the body. And then there is a sociologist that deals with a person in the larger context of the societal concept, surrounding of a person. And then you have the political science, you have economics, you have this and this and that. So they have fragmented knowledge into compartments, basically. Now they're coming to the realization back again that this is, after we specialized and we went in depth in each discipline, we're realizing that this is not the way we should be dealing with humans. Because if it's a human issue, we don't come in parts, basically. And it's not, we're not, consisting of parts put together. We're, collective. So they started the interdisciplinary disciplines, where student can actually study different disciplines at the same time and give them exposure to many of them at the same time. So there is the interdisciplinary, the intradisciplinary, and otherwise. And we started putting back things together to try to find out and deal with issues of human beings in a different way, in more of a collective way. So how is this related to us as Muslims? In the projects of IIIT now that we're going into it, the integration of knowledge, and the journey that went through from Islamization to integration of knowledge, and the realization that integration is what actually is needed for us as Muslims right now. It's a Muslim concept. We believe in the unity of Allah and God. We believe in the unity of the creation. And we believe in the unity of the universe, that there is one creator who created the universe and we are part of it. And this is manifested nicely in the Quran in different ways. I would take, for example, a concept like al-haq, the word al-haq, and I won't translate it. A majority of you, I think you know what it is. So if you take the verse in Surah Yusuf, when it talks al-ana hashas al-haq, right? Al-ana hashas al-haq. Al-haq here, it means truth. Sidq, So you follow this concept in the Quran and you find out that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is using this same word, al-haq. Here it's used as the truth and telling the truth at an individual level in the story of Yusuf. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, خلق السماوات والأرض بالحق. And again, he's using the same word, al-haq. But as it relates to its own creation, Allah's creation, السماوات والأرض, which covers the whole universe, pretty much. He created it بالحق. So it went from the individual level, telling truth, to al-haq as a manifestation in his own creation. And then another verse that talks about al-haq, and it says, Allahu al-haq, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a creator. So it went from the individual level, telling the truth, to his own creation that contains as-samawat wal-ard, to him in his glory, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah is al-haq. So the Quran teaches us that there are different levels to, and should be, to our understanding. And this unity of the individual within the universe, with Khaliq subhanahu wa ta'ala, who created all of this unity of knowledge cannot be divided the way that the West has dealt with it from a materialistic perspective. Because they looked at deen as religion and faith in a separate way from the materialistic universe that's around us. So we go and try to, whether it's in physics or engineering or whatever, to discover the world and what's out there. in isolation of our faith. So the faith is on one side and what you do on the other side. And you know what? In our own schools, Islamic schools, in many ways, unfortunately, that's what you see. If you go around, at least my experience in the United States, Islamic schools teaches math and science and teach the public school curriculum as it is, without a whole lot of effort to localize it, if you would, to our Muslim youth. You know, I sent my kids to a Muslim school, and that's what they've been taught. They are taught the public school curriculum. The add-on curriculum is the Islamic studies. So Islamic studies become an hour, Quran, Hadith, or whatever it might be. So we teach you this, and then the public schools in a different realm and is doing their own thing. As if we adopted the same concept pretty much with not a whole lot of difference. We teach Islam separately from everything else. So as if when I become a Muslim, I'm isolated from what's out there in the world. So you find lots of people who are, mashallah, brilliant in their own field. You know, they're engineers, they're doctors, they're physicians, they're physicists, and so on. And when it comes to their Islamic conceptual framework, you find it is pretty primitive, unfortunately. It's not up to par with who they are, who they deal with, and what they stand for. And this is a dichotomy. It's a problem, for us. If we keep teaching Islamic studies and Islam as a separate subject matter, separate from science, separate from math, separate from economics, we'll never be able to solve the problem. We'll always be, kind of split personalities. You know, we deal with science in one way, we deal with social sciences a different way, and we deal with Islamic issues and Islamic studies in a different way. And this is part of, to me, as we deal with educational crisis in the Muslim world, this is part of the problem. So the integration of knowledge means all of that, conceptually, as a framework. And what IIIT would like to do as an institution now, by more focus on education, is to assist, facilitate, and hope to advance a reform of education in this way. In other words, it's not only the focus on Islamic education per se, that one or two subjects that we teach as Islamic studies on the side, but in its integrated form, where you deal with social sciences, you deal with the physical sciences too, but from an Islamic perspective. I give you an example, which, sometimes, if you are a psychologist, for example, there's a Quranic concept similar to al-haq, about an assumptions, about an-nafs, about the soul, about the spirit, about who we are as a human. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in many verses that I don't want to go through details, you all know it, talks about this. So does this assumption in terms of the psychology that we have been taught, if you go to a university or even at the K-12 school level, is this congruent with this assumption that we have in the Quran and the Islamic faith about an-nafs? Probably not. Take economics, and I'm not an economist, but Quran talks about the Western economics is based on scarcity, right? And al-ard wal-talab, supply and demand. And these are the concepts that the economic theory basically based on. It's based on scarcity of resources. Whereas the Quran talks about abundance, not scarcity. So if you build an economic theory on scarcity, as Muslims, these concepts and these theories are already in contradiction of our belief system to a certain extent. So it's no longer just the faith in its pure sense. We're dealing with a completely different issue. Where the Quran talks about abundance. It doesn't talk about scarcity. وَسَخَّرَ لَكُمْ, and the concept of taskhir, سَخَّرَ لَكُمْ. So, and we actually see it in many ways. I was telling the brothers the other day, you know, look at oil as a scarce resource. And, you know, the West and the petroleum engineers, they have been telling us that it will be depleted in 20 years or 30 years or whatever. And they give, you know, sort of a time span for that, right? Well, just a few years ago, in the US, for example, new methods of extracting oil, fracking and otherwise, new technology, they're realizing that there is unlimited, almost unlimited, you know, reserve of oil that they could extract. And now the US is actually one of the world's largest producer. And they have energy independence. They're no longer dependent on Middle Eastern oil as it used to be the case before because of the new technology. But we didn't know that 10 or 15, probably 20 years ago, before this technology has been, you know, discovered. So this is just one example, of course. So the economics that deals with the economic theory that's based on scarcity is one thing, and an economic theory that's based on abundance, as should be the case for us as Muslims, is a different thing. So I guess what I'm saying, the issue of education and reform of education, and for us as an institutions to facilitate advancing reform of education in Muslim societies, which is one of the projects that we are focusing on right now, it does not and should not deal with Islamic studies component in our schools or universities. In other words, we shouldn't be dealing with or looking at this as Islamic studies per se, and we deal with Islamic studies at a university level, and we only deal with Islamic subject matter in K-12. It's a whole new knowledge generation and knowledge creation paradigm. And that was the concept actually of Islamization of knowledge initially, and integration of knowledge to a certain extent. I don't want to take too long because the reason we are here is we want to listen to you and know what your problems are, what your issues are, and not only just problems, but on a positive side, actually part of this project, we started a survey for best practices in Muslim societies, of education in Muslim societies. So we didn't want to start with the malaise of the Ummah, the problems of the Ummah, and all of the other stuff that we have heard for so many years. We're starting with a positive note, an appreciative inquiry, if you would, technique. So we started collecting best practices, and if you have any, of course, more than welcome, and that's what we're here for, to submit those to us. So we're collecting best practices in Muslim societies in education, you know, and there are many, I'm sure, once we start digging into it. And already there, you know, people talk about the madrasa system, you know, particularly in India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and other places, as if it's a backward schooling system. But in reality, there is a study by Ibrahim Musa, who is a professor at Duke University, who wrote a book on the madrasa system. And although there are issues that definitely we have to deal with, and there are some of these institutions that are probably not up to the standard of education that we want, but there are many also that are integrating technology, and there are examples of those. Actually, in our study, we showed that. And in this book, he showed some examples of this, that they integrate technology into the curriculum, they integrate modern science into the curriculum, in addition to the traditional Islamic studies. This is not an ideal model, But given under the circumstances, we should not just, shun off this schooling system because, somehow, people have labeling this schooling system as, a place to grow tourists and incubate terrorists and terrorism and all of that. And this is happening, unfortunately, and I don't want to digress a lot, but it's happening because we're followers, we're not leaders anymore. If we are leaders, we own the narrative. The narrative right now that we are on the defensive, we're trying to always be on the side of defending ourselves. So someone would say Muslims are terrorists, we try to say no, we are not. Or we are extremists, and no, we are not. But in reality, if we are leading the way, and we are, as we used to be at one point, leading civilization, contributing to it positively, we won't be on the defensive. On the contrary, we will be leading the way. And that's what we want our educational systems to be. Part of this madrasa system study also, it showed that, if you look at U.S. education, higher education system right now, it's the most inefficient. It's effective. It's the best education in the world. But it's one of the most inefficient systems. And they admit that. Their own studies say that. That's why tuition is so high and is going through the roof every year, with an increase of 5, 10, 15%, to the point where a lot of people cannot afford it anymore. Because you pay for education there. It's not free education in the U.S. So it's inefficient in terms of how your money is being spent. Because of the different layers, of course, of whether it's faculty, administrators, or whatever. It's a system that has been working, and it's fine, but it's inefficient. You look at the madrasa system, or the way our higher education, Islamically, even traditionally, that was carried on. We have the system, for example, of ijaza, that the West now and the U.S. is going back to, in reality. The system of ijaza is basically someone who is a scholar in an area, and you study under that scholar hadith or fiqh or Quran or whatever it might be that he is, very good at, the best known. And then he would give you an, that you've passed, you mastered this discipline. And if you look at the U.S. right now, with the online education and open education and all of that, we're going back to that system. You take the best person in chemistry, and their courses are online, being developed for literally tens of thousands of students who take it from that professor, because you have the freedom to go anywhere you want to. And some universities are given credit for these courses, and some of universities, they have it as an open system, like Massachusetts, MIT. So I think we shouldn't, and this is in our tradition, and we gave it up a long time ago in lieu of a Western educational system of housing students and faculty in an institution like a university. And we kept running after this model, and we actually cherish this model. We fight to be ranked, for our universities to be ranked the best of the best to compete with the Western system. But our own system, we abandoned it, and we didn't even build on it until someone else, whether it's in Europe or in the U.S., discover it again, rediscover it, and bring it back to us. And then it becomes a wonderful thing, because it's no longer ours, it's an American system. So we need to look more critically into what we have. It's kind of ironic, and it's sometimes, it's not, it's something that might, one feel always the spirit of defeat, and it just causes to go through a vicious spiral cycle But we need to be a little bit more critical, but in the meantime, we should cherish the best practices that we have. We should promote them. We should support what works and try to build on it instead of running after whatever is, the latest thing that's out there. I want to stop here and go over yesterday. Again, this goes back to the issue of that we want to hear from you, and we're here basically to facilitate your own work. So we heard from you on the issues of communities and your own communities and the issues that you have been dealing with. Some of you have a few Muslims on an island where you need to build a mosque, you need to build a school, you need to do this and that. So there was a survey that was distributed to all of you yesterday. And Brother Ahmed here has the questions, and he will just go over them, remind you of what the questions were for those of you who were not here yesterday and were not familiar with it. So he will go over the survey itself, the questions that were asked, and then we summarize the results of that questionnaire that we got back from you. This is the feedback that we got from you, all about the problems of education in your own communities. So I will go briefly if there is enough time. Which is I think it's 10:15, so there might not be enough time to go over it in details, but I'll just point out a few things that we got back, the feedback that we got from all of you. So Ahmed, you want to?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام سيدنا محمد عبده ورسوله. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In addition to the survey, we got brothers and sisters from at least 20 to 25 Caribbean islands and countries here. We've been talking to people, trying to find out what the issues are. And like from the beginning, we made it very clear, education is one of the big issues that we need to tackle. And it's surprising for me as well, it's the first time being in the Caribbean, talking to these brothers and sisters, finding out the community with about only 5 Muslim, the community with hundreds of thousands of Muslims like Trinidad, Guyana. And it's a mixed sort of problem, mixed sort of issues, and we can find one solution, we won't fit all. And talking to them, they got this, people with a very small community, the people with a very big community have exactly the same issues in the sense of they want the best for the children. They want the children to be educated to the highest level. They want all the opportunities that can be thrown for the children to be shakers and movers in this world. And we would want to work with you. We want to facilitate that for our children. We want the best for our children. Like Dr. Alwani says, we need to go to that next step, that next level, and try to understand it. So we passed on that survey, get them to feedback. And there was 6 questions, 3 on the normal current system, and 3 on the madrasas, Islamic education. And we asked them to explain 3 main issues or challenges that they think for their own circumstances, own situation. The first question is the 3 challenges on the children, which is the primary, the lower education, what they think are the problem in the community, in the country. The second one is for the youth, secondary, middle class, middle level education. And the third one is at university, high level, further education, what we think is the problem. Believe me, we've been talking to Dr. Alwani and Sister Sharifa. We got pages and pages of issues we're going to distribute. We summarize it into, it took 2 A4 papers just to put down these issues. We're going to circulate it with you all, inshallah, and hopefully in the next session, the next program, we will be looking at these issues and trying together, because we need to be at the grassroots level, understand the issue as it is in every home, every parent, what's the problem, what the things the priority is, and the plan as well. We've got so many good brothers and sisters, good countries, good practice. We want to share that. We want to see, we can't solve every problem. Some of the standard government system, we can't change that, but we need to work with the system, make it best and better for our children, inshallah. They are our future leaders, we want the best for them. So inshallah, I won't take too much of your time. There will be a summary, and you will find there's so many bullet points in there. We try to break it down for each effort. So we would like, inshallah, the facilitators being informed about it, to take the survey, have a look at the feedback from the surveys that we've summarized, and then inshallah from there we can formulate some sort of a decision how we want to move forward with that. Jazakallah khairan.
Thank you very much, brother. I would now like to invite questions and comments. You all have listened to a very comprehensive presentation, particularly the issues facing, Muslim schools, and I was particularly concerned about the fragmentation of knowledge and also the division of education into religious and secular. I think that's an issue that is facing our schools. Now, we have a number of people from Trinidad, a number of teachers, and we do have the same crisis as the Muslim schools in the US, where it's a Muslim school, but we follow the curriculum of the public schools. We are controlled by the Ministry of Education, we are monitored, we do the same exams, we follow the same syllabus, and we have a few periods of religious education. So it is, I would like to hear from the teachers, and also some of the other delegates for the conference, how we will address this particular crisis, because what we are talking about, the type of individual that we produce at the end of 5 or 7 years. Are we putting on people in the society? Are we producing well-rounded Islamic personalities, or are we producing people who have fragmentation in terms of their thinking, who are unable to apply the values, the concepts, principles of Islam, to contemporary issues? So, to what extent are we shaping Islamic personalities? To what extent are we producing people who have this dichotomy in their minds and in their lives as to what is religious and what is secular? So I'd like to hear from the teachers. We know that it is not a new issue, and we know that people rush to get their children into certain schools. And my apologies to all of our teachers, but it is not because we are Muslim schools. It is because we produce a high standard of academic excellence. That is the main reason why people are attracted to certain schools. That's my opinion, but I think that I would like to hear from you all in terms of how could we move from where we are, because we are definitely in a crisis, and I think that I would like to hear from you all how we could go about addressing it, and how brother could give us some advice. Thank you very much, Al-Wani, for a very, very good presentation, and I hope that it will stimulate us to think in terms of what we are doing and how we could improve. So, anyone, please feel free to comment.
Excuse me?
Yes, sir.
May I comment?
Yeah, sure.
Assalamu alaikum. I come to you from U.S. Virgin Islands as a former educator, retired principal of a school called Iqra Academy. One of the challenges that we've had over the years is a cultural issue, which has to do with, we prepare our children all these years, we give them Quran, Islamic, Arabic, and a comprehensive K-12 education. But one of the things that I have found to be challenging that interferes with the furtherance of our students who graduate And it's vexing to me to spend all these years with these brilliant students who are not allowed to leave their home to go to college because the parents fear that they will lose their dean when they go away to school. Okay? And, we've had numerous students who can get into MIT and all the best colleges, but their cultural fears of sending their children off to school into the dunya more or less will sort of invalidate their Islam. It's just really heart-wrenching for me to see. I can remember this young student. She's so brilliant, but her parents aren't going to let her leave. This community, what they do is they try to keep their children close to home. And for the men, marry them off, the sisters, marry them off as soon as they can. And for the young brothers, they kind of train them basically to take over their family businesses rather than challenge them to try to diversify their knowledge and to be able to pursue higher knowledge, become a doctor or whatever. But for example, this wants to lose their family on gas station. Okay, it's a profitable, lucrative business. However, their son, brilliant young man, they're not allowing him to go off island because of their fear of him losing the deal. But I think that's some sort of a rouge where they're just trying to keep him to train him into the family business. Now, that's a challenge. It's kind of hard for me as a principal of school to just see that happen. All that wasted talent, and you're just there within your whole family, not even integrated with the whole community at large. So that was a vexing experience for me as a principal, and I'm hoping that this panel can sort of address that kind of issue. And it's hard to circumvent culture. That's who we are in a certain sense. But I think education should trump culture in some shape or form. So I just wanted to say that to kind of get this thing off to a start so that we all can sort of benefit from it. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, brother, for the question. I think society, every country deals with cultural issues. This is probably not something that's related to Muslims only. Muslims and non-Muslims deal with these issues all the time. There are families who don't send their kids to college for many reasons. Even in the States, quite frankly, and non-Muslim, families that they don't like to send their kids sometimes outside the home. So this is, I think it's a worldwide issue and problem. It's not so much to Islamic schools or Islamic education in general, or education in Muslim societies, put it this way. But it is definitely something that we have to deal with. So there are different forces in terms of that play a part. Culture is one of them, religion and values one of them, family structure is one of them, and that's part of why our focus in education, we're not only focusing on K-12, we're not focusing on higher education only. So we're covering the whole spectrum because of this, because it's a continuum, that starts with the family, goes into K-12 schools, and go into education. So parenting, for example, is part of what IIIT is concerned about, and is one of the programs that we have. We published few books. Dr. Hisham Al-Talib is one of the founders of IIIT, and he's an expert in this area, particularly from an Islamic perspective. getting the parents and the family involved in the schooling of their children is definitely something that has to happen. Then we have youth development programs too. So we have to focus on the informal and the formal education, and culture is definitely part of that, I would say. So thank you very much, and indeed this is a problem that we do need to deal with.
Thank you very much. We take just one more question, or maybe two, and then we will proceed for a short break.
I'm from Adam, and I'm also principal for Islamic school. And Sheikh touched on the challenges that we face, the same challenges that Muslim school has spoken to several principals of Muslim schools, Islamic schools, and the issue of fragmentation of knowledge is something that has been under discussion for quite a number of years. I remember when I was much younger, this issue was discussed. Now, the principal of the school, and it's still being discussed, how to integrate the fragments. Now, we can look at the model that the West has, and the resources that is placed on curriculum development, and making resources available. Have the best minds, people within the Ummah. This should be an international move, and I feel like it can be the driving force behind this. That we need to have the minds, the brilliant minds who can merge, bring these thoughts together. You cannot expect, and let us don't bury heads in the sand. You cannot expect teachers at the secondary school level who have just gotten a bachelor's degree to be able to integrate this. We need experts in this. And by having experts in this, others can benefit. Textbooks, let us say for in Caribbean, we have 6 textbooks. The experts are involved in writing these textbooks. So we have to get a list of experts to write this textbook. It may differ from country to country, but as long as they are available, we can modify, we can take that which applies to us and use it in our school system. There are so many Muslim schools that are emerging, and they are faced with the same problem of integrating the fragments. That's point one. The next point is, and it's very critical, while students are the main stakeholders in education, teachers play an important part. Teachers come next. We have to be able to train the teachers to mold our children. And a program, teachers program, also needs to be developed to train our teachers so they can deliver in this regard. Alright. Last point, and this is my own experience as principal of an Islamic institution. After our school, my school that I'm from is named Isa Islamic School, and it's a premier Islamic institution in Islamic school in Guyana. We do well academically, but one thing that bothers me, that so much resources is placed and emphasis is placed in our students to give them the academic and Islamic education. As soon as they leave our doors, many of them are released to the wild. They go to university, they are released to the wild. Right? And this is something that you need to put some thought in. Why, how can we, and I guess it's a cultural issue too, that especially where you have boys and girls are segregated. Going to the university setting, in our school is not like that because we had our own experience with that. Boys and girls separated, in fact, performance went down. Alright, performance went down. We brought them together, mashallah. They're doing better. But this cultural shock, when you have to go and interact with society, all right, is something that, after coming from a protected environment, this niche that the Islamic school provides, our youth are finding it difficult to integrate in the wider society. Exactly.
Thank you, brother. I could have not said it better. I mean, this is, definitely part of what we're trying to do here is to facilitate the first issue that the brother raised, which is to have experts in curriculum development. So we divided in this project, as we're carrying it on, ourselves into 5 units. Curriculum does not, it's a living thing, you know, it's not no longer like a textbook that you give to the students or teach. So it has different components that go with it. You know, part of what affects schools and universities, in this case, of course, is the policy component. So we have a research unit on educational policy, because certainly if you look at your school, the policy of your Ministry of Education or your country plays a big part in this. So there's an ecosystem for the curriculum, and that's what we address. There's a leadership issue also in each school or university, the administration and leadership. So we have a unit on administration and leadership. It is a research unit that focuses on providing you as an administrator with data to support your work. So we don't know the work for you, we facilitate it by giving you the data that you might need to make informed decisions. And then we have a unit that works on curriculum development. And again, curriculum, just like you rightly said, it's specific to each area, so we cannot have like a universal curriculum. But we certainly can have a curriculum that could be used as a nucleus for whatever else that you can build on it, and you can tailor it to your own needs. And then there's, as the brother said, the teacher training program, so the pedagogy and instruction unit. And again, we might not do the training, the actual training for you, but maybe we could facilitate that by training the trainer, or supplement what your teacher's training workshops are with some material that could be helpful to teach the curriculum that we are talking about, the integrated curriculum that we're hoping to produce. And then there is an issue that we a lot of time ignore, which is the assessment and evaluation part. Because if you don't assess and evaluate, if you don't assess the curriculum and whether the learning is taking place and what kind of learning your students are actually carrying on when they go out the door, and you're evaluating the program themselves, then you might end up with the problem that you rightly assessed. And this is universal, by the way, in our schools too. When they go to the university, coming out of Islamic schools, ironically, they're wild. You know, they're not the tamed, students that you have had in your K-12 schools. Unfortunately, that's true, and in our community too. It seems like it's universal, it's more or less. I'm not familiar with the education here in the Caribbean, but it's the same problem that we deal with, because maybe they come from a confined environment, a segregated environment, with norms and rules and stuff that sometimes burden them throughout their K-12 career. And so when they go to the university, they're kind of, wide open. And also the attractiveness. I mean, I noticed in my own kids, he dread the experience of going to Islamic school or Sunday school or the Adam Center, our masjid school. But he would love to go to the public school. For some reason, they make it so attractive. I don't know what it is, but there's something wrong there. And I think through a systematic evaluation and assessment of our programs, we might be able to put our hands on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll take our final question. You can save your questions for the next session, which is more or less a follow-up.
I'm just wondering aloud if first I thank you for the beautiful presentations and the stress on the fact that we used to be in the leadership, but now we are, for some reason, backing others. I just want to ask, first and foremost, is there any relevance of the verse of the Quran that says, and I quote, "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Qul inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alamin la sharika lahu wa bidhalika umirtu." That say my salat and all my acts of worship, my slaughtering of animals, wa mahyaya, and all my acts of living, wa mamati, even my death, lillahi rabbil alamin. Does this one give us a conceptual question mark on the dichotomy between Islamic school on the one hand and secularity on the other? Whereby, are we not supposed to look at Islam as from an integrated perspective? Dunya is one thing, Akhirah is another thing. That one is emphasized in the Quran, but not in a state of dichotomy, but stages that have to be passed through. In a sense, we were in a stage before we come into being. هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. The Quran emphasized. Did man remember the time when he was something that nobody ever mentioned? And then we were brought into being, which is our dunya. And then after that we go to another stage, we call it barzakh. We don't know what stage it looks like. And then finally the akhirah. The Quran emphasizes. But then when we now talk about Islamic studies, we talk about Quran and Sunnah. So why can't we look at that as a conceptual, whereby Muslims will be trained in such a way as not to separate? We have a sister in New Jersey, by 7 years old, she memorized the Quran. Now she's planning to be a doctor or to be an engineer. Islam is going to dictate the way in which our life is. And if we can apply the same thing to our far from family level, whereby we look at Islam as a comprehensive one rather than a separate entity.
I think that's what we are talking about. That Islam is comprehensive, and it is a conceptual framework for all our life. But I think the question is, there's an assumption that, okay, if I am Hafiz the Quran and I memorize the Quran and then I'm practicing engineer, somehow we assume that this will be reflected in my behavior. But the reality is otherwise. I have seen, and I'm sure you all have seen, people who have studied in Islamic schools all their life, have been raised by parents who have taught them Quran from the day they were born, and they recited it in their ears. And by the time they, as we were saying, brother there pointed out, by the time they go to college, they're wild. So I think there's an assumption. It's a good assumption, and it should work. But it's just like the Quran talks about Imra'at Nuh, or Imra'at Fir'aun, the son of Nuh. So you don't have control over what the result is. But what we can do is provide data, at least scientifically, and that's the data issue that we were talking about yesterday, So at least we will not be shooting in the dark. We will be basing our decisions on some sort of a scientific method that through assessment, through evaluation, that we are doing our part. We're imparting the knowledge of Islam in the context of whatever other things that we do. So we help students to integrate in a sense, rather than the problem that we're facing right now, and in some so-called Islamic universities are doing. They teach the student the social sciences, so if you are studying economics or psychology, you would take the secular or Western economics basically, and then you take maybe a minor in Islamic studies. And somehow the assumption there is that the student will integrate the two. How? It hasn't been really assessed or evaluated scientifically to the point where this is working. It worked in some instances, anecdotal evidence, and it didn't work in other instances. So I think all we're saying here is that yes, we agree conceptually, that's what we all want to achieve. The second point is that we cannot assume just by having someone studying Quran and studying Islamic, the Islamic religion and inculcate values of Islam in his or her own life, that by the time they become professionals, doctors or engineers or teachers or whatever vocation that they might be, immersed in, that they will practice that Islam and what they have learned. Because the evidence says otherwise in some instances. So I think all we're saying is that we need to collect data on this model. We agree on the conceptual framework, and then we plan ahead what it is that we need to do to actually achieve this same goal that we all after.
Thank you very much, brother. I will now bring this session to a close, and we have just 10 minutes break. We have liquid refreshments, which you can help yourselves. Coffee, tea, water, juice. I would invite the panelists to the next session to come forward to the head table, please. Assalamu alaikum.